So this first chapter talked about programming and how programming can be the actual content or the people who actually schedule that content. The three things that were changing programming today that the chapter kind of talked about was digitization, internet access, and media competition. It talked a lot about consolidation and convergence and kind of the cross-media kind of thing and how that leads to more of recycling and reusing programs. It talked about the goal of programming was to basically make advertisers happy. And you make advertisers happy by making audience members happy. And audience members just want to be informed and entertained, according to this chapter. It talked about the sources of programs, mainly from network programs, syndicated programs, local programs, and online programs. It talked a lot about the top 10 networks, which were ABC, CBS, CW, Fox, My Network TV, NBC, three major Spanish language networks, and PBS, but it said that sometimes PBS gets left off. It talked about a lot of the kind of four major aspects of programming as far as scheduling goes. It said that scheduling was the number one thing, but promotion was also really important because without promotion, audience members could either miss the show because they're not reminded of when it comes on, or audience members just could not even know the show exists. It talked about the elements of programming, like compatibility or revolving the programming around what regular people do on a regular day-to-day basis. It talked about how it kind of relies on habit formation and how people habitually will watch TV shows. Control of audience flow, conservation of program resources, and breadth of appeal, meaning it was important to appeal to a large audience and kind of cross different social groups and not broadcast so narrowly. It talked a lot about the problem of cable and internet, creating program scarcity and how networks had to compensate for that by recycling and reusing programs. And it talked also about the external influences of programming, like technological influences. It talked about digitization as one of them and how that lessened the dependence of stations on networks to provide programming, but it also reduced the number of channels that were available for viewers. It also talked about a lot of convergence as far as the technological influence. This chapter discussed economic influences. Basically what it comes down to is that quality programming is pretty expensive. I talked about ownership influences. To owners, the main goal is to maximize revenue for that parent corporation, and it's not really to get higher ratings. It also discussed the advantages of group ownership, and the main advantage of that was cost saving when it comes to programming. It talked about some regulatory influences like net neutrality, fairness, limits on monopoly, pressures for localism, and it also talked about copyright and the difference between stations and networks and how they only have to buy licenses for the content that they want to pay and replay, while cable operators provide retransmission compensation to the copyright holder, and now they're kind of going into requiring receiving retransmission consent. Other regulations it talked about was indecency and how that kind of only applies to broadcasting, and how it got started with the whole George Carlin 7 dirty words as their go-to for what should be regulated, and then it talked about safe harbor periods at night for adult material. And it also went into a little bit about libel and kind of what's allowed by broadcasters, but also what they have to avoid doing, like reckless disregard for the truth or malice. And then finally it talked about ethical influences, and basically how there was a broadening of what could be or what is being considered acceptable when it comes to broadcast material. And that pretty much covers chapter 1.